Good morning. My name is John Roy. Welcome to What You're Reading, and today I'm joined by
William Fisher.
And William has been reading something. What you been reading, William?
I've been reading The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt.
All right, The Righteous Mind. Well, give me the elevator speech. Convince me that I ought to pick it up, or as you did, listen to it on Audible.
I did. So it is a nonfiction about moral psychology, social psychology, and a little bit of evolutionary psychology. And it's about why we can get so divided over a lot of different things.
Wow, that sounds like an important topic these days.
It is.
And don't let all of that psychology scare you off. It's not an academic book. It's a book written for the lay reader, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
More or less. And so I think you'll find it to be a pretty easy read. And I actually think it's going to be kind of like gravity. It'll suck you in from the very beginning. All right. So you read the book. It's about those subjects. You finished the book. How'd you feel? What'd you feel at the end?
So I felt a lot of wonder and a lot of, awe. I'm like, wow, that explains a lot. It explains a lot about me, explains a lot about my family, explains a lot about my, my friends and how we interact with each other, we interact with other people. And it was like, this was really helpful.
Okay. All right. So you found it insightful, challenging, had some few aha moments. Did it? And it's not a book that really tries to change your opinion, is it?
No.
It really just tries to open a door to let you see why you've already drawn a lot of the conclusions you've drawn.
Right.
Okay. All right. Do you have a quote or two that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so he talks a lot about morality, and I think my favorite quote is, morality binds and it blinds.
All right. When you hear that, what do you think of?
So I think that a lot of, my morals kind of block me into this is right and this is wrong, and that's final. Like, I don't really have room to question that. That's what it is. And it blinds me to see other people's morality and why they can do something that I think is completely wrong. Because it's like, well, how can you do that? That's immoral.
Okay. And once you make it a moral issue, you've ratcheted up the tension a bit.
Yeah.
When I was in school, I took a lot of philosophy, and one of the philosophy professors posed this question. It was a morality question. Someone comes running into our room, and they say, "Please hide me. Please let me hide in here somewhere. My husband is beating me. I need to hide." And so we end up opening up a window and letting them climb out the window. And then her husband comes running in. And he says, "Now, have you seen my wife? Have you seen my wife?" And the professor says, "What's the moral thing to do here?" What is the moral thing to do? It's a little dilemma, isn't it? But a lot of our morality and ethics tell us, well, thou shalt not lie. So, but you know that he's been beating her. You can see the blood on her face.
Yeah.
So it's a quandary. And I suppose that this guy is trying to open our minds to the idea that morality and decision making is not as black and white as it appears.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you know anything about Jonathan? It's Jonathan Haidt, right?
Yes.
Do you know anything about his background?
Yeah, so he is, professor of psychology at UVA. He's written, I think, a couple of books, but he's written a lot of different articles and papers all about this particular topic of moral psychology.
Okay. And so moral psychology, what's the definition of that?
So I think it's just the science of where do we get morals and where do they come from and how do they affect us.
Okay. Now, you and I had already done a little talking beforehand, and William had said that one of the things that was a little bit, he wished it had more solid science foundation because it's more of a theory than it is anything else, although it does appear on the surface to be accurate.
Right.
Does he cite evidence? Does he have studies?
Yeah. So a lot of the book is very science-based. It's very like, this is a study that was done, here's what it means.
Okay.
A lot of it, since I read it on Audible, there's just like tons of charts, tons of graphs, tons of citations. You can look at like the evidence that he presents, and I think it's really good. So it's not just him spouting off opinions and then saying you do what you want. It is a lot science based. It is newer science.
Newer science. We don't have 100 years of science on
Right.
it, but we do have some data on it.
Right.
So why why do we have the morals that we have? Why do people have different morals?
You got to read the book, John.
Come on, we're trying to help these people go out and buy the book. So give them a little hint that they're going to have some answers.
So a lot of what he talks about is social intuitionism, which is we feel something and then our mind comes up with reasons why. So
Okay.
I might be like, I don't like your shirt. I don't know why, but I'm going to figure out reasons why I don't like your shirt.
Okay.
And my mind's going to come along and say, well, I don't like the color, or it's not the right season for that, or I don't like it on you. And so we have a lot of intuitions, and then our mind comes along and says, here's why.
Okay. So, and the intuition is not based on fact at all.
No.
And then but we justify our intuition. And I sometimes think of ourselves as painting ourselves into a corner then. We've come to a conclusion that we can't really rationally explain. It's just the way I feel, intuition, and so I'm digging in my heels here. And lo and behold, there has to be somebody who holds the opposite position, and they're using the same method, intuition, to draw a different conclusion. They've painted themselves in a corner. And so how do we ever resolve any tension in our lives?
So I think that really just comes down to being open-minded and not, just shut down anything they say. I don't even think you need to change your perspective. You just need to be willing to put on their shoes and see what they think. I think, for me at least, growing up, it was a lot of, you're just wrong and stupid, and that's it. I'm not even going to bother looking at your argument because I know it's wrong. But now it's like, well, let's see what you think, and it's usually not a terrible argument. Usually, people don't believe in some wacky, crazy thing. They usually believe facts. They believe science, and being able to understand that and not just completely brush them off and saying, well, that's just crazy, you're wrong.
Okay. Does he cite any examples that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I think a good example is...
Other than my shirt.
is ownership, and I think especially of land. And so in America, ownership is very important. So I own my land. If you come on my land, I'm going to do everything in my power to get you off my land if I don't want you here. Right? That is very important. It's you cannot be on my land. But for someone like the Native Americans, land ownership wasn't really a big deal. It was I might live over here, but you can kind of come over whenever, and that's not a problem. We all kind of share the same thing, and that's not a big deal. But in America, it's almost immoral if you trespass. That is against the law if you trespass. But no one really says why. It just because it is. It's this is mine. That's it.
Right.
But for someone like Native Americans, it's just everyone's.
Okay.
It's not really anyone's.
And so, how did we get to that point? How did we draw the conclusion that my land was my land and you couldn't get on my land? How did we come? Does he venture into that?
Not really. I think that a lot of that comes from selfishness and wanting to be isolated, not have to deal with you. Because the less I have to be around you, the more I can be selfish. And so I think it does kind of coincide. And it's just I don't want to be around you. I don't want to hear your perspective. I'm just going to go over here and be by myself.
Okay.
I think a lot of isolation leads to a lot more hate and vitriol and closed-mindedness.
Okay. How's the book divided up, William?
So it's in three main parts. The first part is social intuitionism. The second part is moral foundations. And then the third part is group identity.
Okay. I think the social... the first one we just went over, intuition.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that third part, the group. What was it called? Group
identity.
Group identity.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me more about that section.
So, and in this section, he talks a lot about political identity and then religious identity as well. But I think a good kind of non-polarizing example would be football teams.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
So I may love Clemson. And that is my team, and I identified with that team, and I've so identified with it that if they lose, I lose, right? So if they lose, I am now affected by that, maybe mentally, maybe even spiritually. I am devastated that they lost the championship, right? I'm devastated they lost the game, and it affects me. But why? Why does it affect me if I'm not even playing the game? I don't have any stakes in it. There's nothing that should affect me, but it does. It's why did that affect me? And he talks a lot about kind of why that is, and how do we get so dived in. I think it's just a lot of identity. So it's
Okay.
like we have to identify with something, and we kind of pick and choose. I want to identify with this, and it kind of just keeps cycling, and we kind of keep getting deeper, and we kind of keep reinforcing that this is who I am. It's not just the group I like. The group is me.
Well, I think a good way to further that conversation is to say, okay, Clemson loses a game, and you're asked about it. And do you respond with, we lost?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you respond with, well, they lost?
Right.
The we lost, you didn't contribute anything.
Right.
And if you'd won, you didn't contribute anything. They lost is more of a, you were able to separate yourself from the
Right.
group and say, they did lose, but it doesn't affect you terribly. I do think that us joining these groups, it would be best, and I haven't read the book, but it would be best if we could distance ourselves from most groups, including our own faith. If we could say, I'm going to try to back this out and not just look at this just as a Christian.
Yeah.
Or just as a Clemson fan, but try to back out a bit and have a little space that might help you make better and
Right.
more moral decisions.
Right.
Because the group just kind of sucks you in. And you find yourself just kind of rubber stamping whatever the group does.
Right.
Another thing about even football is that, if news came out if bad news came out about a Clemson player, all the Clemson fans would rally to explain that in some positive way, where all the Carolina fans would say, look, that's what you get for going to Clemson, right? And if the shoe was reversed, we'd do the same thing.
Right.
And we don't ever really look at the merits and say, well, this guy was a bit of he wasn't the best moral example.
Yeah.
And coming to Clemson didn't clean him
Yeah.
up. So, all right. So, you've given us the breakdown of the book. You've kind of told me how you felt at the end. How do you think this book could help us right now in 2022?
So I think the main thing it does is help explain your own thoughts, your own biases, your own morality, and help explain other people's morality that you think are crazy, and kind of helps you build that bridge instead of the book building the bridge. It kind of equips you to say, how can I build this bridge, instead of just saying this is how you should do it. It kind of gives you the tools and says, have fun, which I really enjoy. It doesn't tell you how to think. It doesn't tell you what to think. It tells you how to think.
All right, so that's a good lead into this. Has it changed the way that you listen to your parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Has it changed the way you listen to other people who previously you would have dismissed, I know what's going to come out of their mouth as soon as they open it? So it has changed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that doesn't mean you've changed your opinion.
Right.
But it does mean that it has changed. And the thing is, it kind of changes that dynamic. And I think you would admit it always changes that dynamic to the positive.
Right.
Listening more and understanding your own biases more never build a wedge.
Right.
Or blow up a bridge.
Right.
They always make things much easier between people. All right. So, tell them the name of the book one more time.
So it is The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt.
And you can get it at Amazon. You can do it on Audible, or you could get the book form, or you can go to your public library. All right. So hopefully you'll read it. Tell us what you thought about it. All right. Thank you. See you next time.